Bienvenue dans les rues de Paris. Ici y en a pour tous les goûts, toutes les envies. Certains à qui tout sourit et d'autres qui dorment par terre ici entre le...
Correspondance. Comment écrire une carte postale ou un mail? Écrire une carte postale. Salut Richard, je t'écris de Rome. C'est une ville magnifique et magique. Je suis ici pour apprendre l'italien. À bientôt, Marilou. Alors Richard le Grand est le destinataire. Marilou est l'expéditeur. 20 rue de la Gare est l'adresse. 2100 Dijon est le code postal plus la ville. France est le pays. Et enfin, nous avons le timbre. Alors, pour commencer une carte postale, nous utilisons les expressions suivantes. Cher, cher, masculin, féminin. Bonjour. Salut. Coucou. Pour conclure une carte postale, nous utilisons je t'embrasse, bisous, bise ou à bientôt, amicalement.
On a beau mettre des croisillons à nos fenêtres, passer au bleu nos devantures et jusqu'aux pneus de nos voitures, désentoiler tous nos musées, chambouler les Champs-Élysées, emmailloter de terre battue toutes les beautés de nos statues, voler le soir, les réverbères, plonger dans le noir la ville lumière. Paris sera toujours Paris, la plus belle ville du monde, malgré l'obscurité profonde, son éclat ne peut être assombri. Sera toujours pareil. Plus on réduit son éclairage, plus on va briller son courage, sa bonne humeur et son esprit. Paris sera toujours pareil. Pour qu'à ce bruit, chacun s'entraîne. On peut la nuit jouer de la sirène et nous contraindre à faire le zouave en pyjama dans notre cave. On aura beau par des ukases, nous couper le veau et même le jazz, nous imposer le masque à gaz, les mots croisés à 4 cases, nous obliger dans nos demeures à nous coucher tous à 11 heures. Paris sera toujours Paris, la plus belle ville du monde, malgré l'obscurité profonde, son éclat ne peut être assombri. Paris sera toujours Paris, plus on réduit son éclairage, plus on voit briller son courage, sa bonne humeur et son esprit. Paris sera toujours Paris.
Donc, dans cette vidéo, les phrases sont au passé. On parle d'un voyage qui a déjà eu lieu, d'un voyage à Paris qui a eu lieu l'année dernière. On utilise le passé composé. Alors, le passé composé est un temps que vous avez déjà étudié. On va juste faire un petit rappel. Alors, pour utiliser le passé composé, on conjugue le verbe qui est ici utilisé comme un auxiliaire, le verbe, l'auxiliaire avoir. Au présent, rappelez-vous, l'auxiliaire avoir au présent, j'ai, tu as, il a, nous avons, vous avez, ils ont. et on ajoute à l'auxiliaire avoir le participe passé du verbe. Donc, par exemple, ici, on a le verbe voyager et le participe passé est voyager et avec un E accent aigu. Écouter, c'est le verbe écouter. Dormi, c'est le verbe dormir, c'est le participe passé du verbe dormir. Et vu, c'est le participe passé du verbe voir. Nous pouvons donc relire les phrases de la vidéo. L'année dernière, ma famille a organisé un voyage à Paris. Le verbe au passé composé et le verbe organiser. On a donc le verbe avoir, a, et le participe passé organisé. Ma famille a organisé. Nous avons voyagé en avion. C'est le verbe voyager, conjugué au passé composé, avons voyagé. Donc on utilise toujours l'auxiliaire avoir et le participe passé du verbe. Pendant le vol, j'ai écouté de la musique, c'est le verbe écouter. J'ai écouté de la musique, auxiliaire avoir et participe passé du verbe écouter. Mon frère a regardé un film, ma mère a dormi. Le premier jour, nous avons pris le bus. Nous avons visité la Tour Eiffel. Ensuite, nous avons visité le Louvre. Mon père a admiré la pyramide du Louvre. Nous avons vu le tableau mythique de Mona Lisa. Nous avons pique-niqué dans les jardins parisiens. Ma mère et moi, on a fait du shopping. Mon père et mon frère, ils ont fait du vélo. Ma famille a fait une croisière sur la Seine et on a dîné sur la Seine.
This video is going to tell you how to talk about the past in French, how to use the past tense, or as we call it, the perfect tense. You've seen this before. Here's a few examples. J'ai mangé, il a mangé, nous avons mangé, and ils ont mangé. I ate, he ate, we ate, and they ate. You'll notice that manger, with an E accent, hasn't changed at all in any of those examples. But every time that you talk about somebody else, this is called changing the subject in French, you've got to change the person, the subject, and the auxiliary. So you've got j'ai mangé, I ate, becomes nous avons mangé, we ate. The manger bit, the bit that means ate, hasn't changed at all, but j'ai has become nous avons. And that's really important because that's the bit where students often make lots of mistakes in forming this tense. There are actually three parts to forming the perfect tense in French. They're called the subject. That's the person you're talking about. For example, je means I. Your auxiliary. That's actually a bit of the verb avoir, but it doesn't matter. It's that bit in yellow. And you also need a past participle. For example, manger. If you don't have all three of those bits, you haven't formed the past tense correctly. J'ai mangé is I ate in the past. If you don't use both parts, the subject and the auxiliary together, you write something like je mangeais, it's incorrect. It doesn't make sense and you run the risk of not getting any credit in the exam for doing something and referring to the past as you want to. It needs to be j'ai mangé. The subject is in blue, the auxiliary is in yellow, and the past participle is in red. Without all three of those elements, you're not going to be accurately able to form the perfect tense. The pattern to actually form the perfect tense for verbs is quite easy to follow. You do the following things. You start with an infinitive verb, like visiter. You take off the last two letters. We're used to doing this in lots of tenses in French. You add the correct ending. Well, for ER, it's E with an accent. That accent is really important. You don't have that accent, and again, the tense is not going to be correct. And then you need to add the correct subject and auxiliary. For example, j'ai or ils ont. So you've got j'ai visité, I visited. Il a visité, he visited. Your past participle, visiter, has not changed at all. It's the subject and the auxiliary that's been changing. Nous avons visité, we visited. And ils ont visité, they visited. There is something to remember though. Not every verb in French ends er. So not every past participle can end e with an accent. Our examples that we follow, like poignarder, is to stab. J'ai poignardé, with an e accent, is I stabbed. However, vomir ends in ir. We can't just be taking off the ir and adding with an e accent. Because it's ir, we've got a different ending. J'ai vomi. It's just the letter I. J'ai vomi. I vomited. And then for re verbs, you take off the re. So attendre means to wait. You take off the re, and you add on a u. J'ai attendu. I waited. That's the one that I think looks the weirdest in French. Luckily, most of the verbs that you will be using finish in er. Therefore, they end e with an accent. And remember, that accent's really important. All of these verbs follow these patterns above. So you could say things like I played, he sold, we vomited, they chose, he changed, you ate, we visited. Using your notes, no problem at all. You've just got to check those last two letters to make sure you're adding the correct thing on. The thing about languages, no matter which one we study, is that not everything follows the regular patterns. There are many things that are irregular, things that we just have to know and we just have to learn. In French, in the perfect tense, it's not actually the person, so the subject or the auxiliary that are irregular. It is just the past participle. So the part that starts j'ai will start j'ai no matter what the past participle is. So lire ends in re, and it means to read. If we took off the re and added a u, liu, that would sound a bit weird. It would look a bit weird in French. So what they do is they change it to lu. So you put it together, j'ai lu, and it means I read. We do the same with drink, boire. We can't just take off the re and add an ending. It actually changes fully to bu. J'ai bu, I drank. Il a fait. Well, the il and the a are exactly the same, but faire, we can't take the re off and add a u. We have to use fait instead. He did. Nous avons voulu. Again, we can't just take off the ir and add a u. We've got to have voulu as our past participle, but again, nous avons voulu. We've got those three parts that we need to say we wanted. Ils ont compris. Ils ont, we can't say comprendre, it becomes compris. They understood. All of these have three elements, just like we need a subject, an auxiliary, and a past participle. So to recap, forming the perfect tense is easy to follow if you use the following steps. You start with an infinitive verb, you take off the last two letters, so visiter becomes visit. You add the correct ending, so if it was er, you put an e with the accent on the end, that's the a sound, visiter, and you add the correct subject and auxiliary. So j'ai visité, I visited, or ils ont visité, they visited. If you haven't got three elements, you know that there's a mistake somewhere. However, you do need to watch out for a few things. Firstly, what if the verb ends with a different spelling to er? So if it was an ir verb, like finir. When you take off the ir, you can't just put an e with an accent on the end. It's an I. So j'ai fini, I finished. And with re verbs, you can't add an e with an accent, you can't add an I. It's a u that needs to be added on. So vendre, to sell, becomes j'ai vendu, I sold. And on top of that, you also have irregular past participles, where we can't take anything off the infinitive and add endings on. It just changes, and we need to know them. That's why having reference to the table beforehand, having notes on what the irregulars are, will really help us, because lire becomes lu, so it's j'ai lu, I read. Now that you've got your notes and you can read them back and you can come back to this video if you're unsure about anything, why don't you test yourselves online? I've put a link below to Languages Online where you can go and practice and get immediate feedback on the perfect tense. Exercise 1 and 2 work with regular endings, so where you do take the last two letters off and you add the correct ending. Exercises 3 and 4 deal with irregular past participles. So they're the ones that change completely from the list you've made in your book that you just need to know. I'll also copy the link into the comments section of the video so that you can just click on it and go straight there and practice. If you follow these notes, you might have 1 or 2 questions. Please bring them into school and ask. However, if you do as you've been instructed here, there'll be loads of things that you'll be able to say in French. You'll be able to add originality and say interesting things about what you've done in the past and have the confidence to know you're doing it accurately.
Samedi à Paris. 1.
Moi, j'ai fait de la gymnastique au club de sport.
2.
J'ai lu le journal et des magazines.
3.
Moi, j'ai regardé un film à la télévision.
4.
J'ai écouté un concert à la radio.
5.
J'ai regardé un film au cinéma.
6.
J'ai fait du shopping à Paris.
7.
J'ai joué de la guitare.
8.
J'ai joué au badminton.
9.
Moi, j'ai regardé des dessins animés à la télé.
10.
J'ai acheté un t-shirt et un short.
11.
J'ai joué au basket.
12.
J'ai lu un livre sur l'espace.